Hi everyone, Patrick Marks here. Thanks for watching. Today's topic, can the atheist worldview explain logic? Part 2. In the last video, I explained that a worldview is a connected set of beliefs about the real world, about what is real and what real things are like. Dr. Jason Liesel, in his book, The Ultimate Proof, says that a worldview has to be able to explain what are the preconditions of intelligibility. In other words, can your worldview explain how it is that we know anything? Now, I've had more views and more comments on the last 4 videos than all of the other videos that I've made combined. And one of the common objections that I've read is that we don't need to explain how we know stuff. Logic is just a made-up way of thinking anyway. By providing answers, atheists are using logic. They are assuming that logic is a real thing. That's a precondition of knowing anything, logic. And the question is, does the atheist worldview adequately explain why logic is real? In fact, I've had a number of atheists saying, I should take a look at my reasoning because it's somehow flawed. They're assuming that logic is true and they're appealing to logic as a standard. But the whole idea of should is a moral argument in the first place. Now, many atheists are very moral people, but the question is, why should anyone be moral in a random universe? If the universe is just a random clash of atoms, why should we do anything? Now, one of the objections that I've read is that logic is just a made-up way, a human made-up way of thinking in the first place. Logic is a convention. In other words, the rules of logic only work because everybody uses them. But if the laws of logic are just made up rules, then they're not really laws and they're not really universal. Why? Because the two sides of an argument could just decide to pick different standards of reasoning. No one would be able to have a rational argument. No one would be able to prove anything. It's not that we made up the laws of logic and we all agree on them. Instead, the laws of logic are real laws that human beings discovered over time. For example, one of the best known laws of logic is called the law of non-contradiction. It states that you cannot have A and not A at the same time and in the same way. So it can't be true that there is milk in my refrigerator and it is not the case that there is milk in my refrigerator at the same time in the same way. Those things can't both be true. Most rational people accept the law of non-contradiction because they've discovered that it makes sense. It's a law of thinking that simply tells it like it is. So the law of non-contradiction is true, not just because we agree on the rule. Now, some people argue that the laws of logic just describe how the human mind thinks. But if that's true, why do we have to describe the laws to correct human thinking? If the laws of logic are just describing how human brains think, then they can't be universal and they can't be for everyone because everyone thinks a little bit differently. Other people try to argue that the laws of logic simply don't need any explanation. We just use the laws of logic, well, because they work. But nobody's arguing that. We already agree that the laws of logic work. The question is, why do they exist in the first place? You see, from the atheist worldview, the material, physical universe is all that is real. So if that's true, that must mean that logic is just chemical reactions within the human brain. Maybe these laws developed over time because it helped ancient hominids survive better than others. But something that helps you survive better is not true, it simply is. For example, my left ear helps me survive better, but it's not true or false, it simply is an ear. Besides, if laws of logic like the law of non-contradiction are just chemical reactions within your brain, then there's no reason for you or anyone to suppose that those laws of logic extend beyond your brain. In other words, we couldn't know if the law of non-contradiction is still true on the surface of Europa because there is no human brain on the surface of Europa. And if the laws of logic are just chemical reactions within our brain, how can we know that the laws of logic will still be true in the future because no one's brain is in the future? Not yet. But most rational people expect the laws of logic, the law of non-contradiction, for example, to be true for everyone, everywhere, and yes, in the future too. But the question is, why should we expect this to be true? If the material universe is all that there is, then the only thing that is really real is just matter in motion. But the laws of logic are not material. They're not physical. You can't bang your funny bone on a law of logic. So that means that the laws of logic are not part of the physical universe, and yet those laws govern the physical universe. The laws of logic are universal. They do work for everyone, everywhere. The laws of logic are eternal. They simply exist. The laws of logic are also unchanging. They are what they are. But the atheist worldview says that the only thing that is really real is just matter in motion. And that doesn't explain the laws of logic. So atheists do use logic, but they can't explain logic from the framework of a purely physical, material universe. Now, some atheists will simply accept the laws of logic and say the laws of mathematics, even though those are invariable, invisible, and eternal ideas. But they still can't explain from their framework why the physical universe would be governed by invisible, immaterial laws. In fact, why does the physical universe change all the time, but the laws of logic do not change? But theists, that is, people who believe in a God, we can explain the laws of logic from the framework of our worldview. Because we understand the laws of logic as a reflection of how God thinks. God is the eternal, pure being, the foundation or the source, the cause of all other causes in the entire chain of cause and effect that is the universe. And we believe that God has revealed some of how he thinks in the Bible. And some of how he thinks, such as the laws of logic, we have discovered over time. God is unchanging. He rules over everything, and he's invisible. And the laws of logic are also unchanging. They rule over everything everywhere, and they're invisible. It's the same concept because the laws of logic are a reflection of who God is and how he thinks. Invisible laws that are not physical but govern the physical universe make sense from the theist worldview, but they don't make sense from a purely physical, purely material worldview. Now, obviously, a lot of atheists accept the laws of logic and use logic all the time, but they can't justify the laws of logic from the framework of their worldview. That means that by accepting the laws of logic, the atheist is actually being arbitrary. And being arbitrary is one form of being irrational. Well, clearly there's more to talk about in this, so I do invite you to subscribe to my channel. In the meantime, be good, don't do anything evil, and I hope to see you next time.